We turn our attention now to police clamping down on protesters at the University of California in Los Angeles in the United States. Police have entered Dixon Court, where the main protest camp is set up, and there are dozens of officers inside the area. They've been tearing down tents and appear to have things under control. Before then, protesters inside the encampment area began tearing down their own barricades. There were shouts of police are firing rubber bullets at us. A lot of police detentions are also taking place. It's been a face-off between the protesters and the police. Demonstrations have been holding in different U.S. universities across the country, with more than 1,000 arrests recorded. And a look at the situation in the University of Texas in Austin. More than 70 arrests have been made as police crack down on the pro-Palestinian demonstrators since protests began last week. The protesters were arrested on Monday during a campus demonstration and booked into the Travis County Jail. They began leaving the jail at about 4 p.m. on Tuesday to cheers, drums, and hugs from family members, friends, and other students. Travis County Attorney Delia Garza, who dropped all criminal charges against 57 protesters who were arrested during another demonstration last week, said on Tuesday law enforcement provided more detailed, more substantive paperwork when they filed charges because law enforcement lacked probable cause. And probable cause is the reason law enforcement provides to justify arrests. The university released a statement on the protests on campus, explaining that non-UT affiliated individuals erected a tent encampment on the south lawn with barricade enclosure of tables secured by metal chains. The school had requested backup assistance from the Texas Department of Public Safety to protect the safety of the campus community and enforce rules that prohibit encampments on campus.
They arrested individuals as soon as they got on. They arrested, I saw them arrest an elderly man. We're not sure how many they've arrested. Clearly, they're making just arbitrary arrests. This is a complete abuse of power. It's a complete violation of people's First Amendment right to free speech and to assemble. And we're watching it all unfold. And this is completely legal. This is completely fine. This repression doesn't scare us. Arrest doesn't scare us. We'll be back and we'll be protesting and we'll continue to confront our institution for its complicity in the genocide until they divest from the weapons manufacturers that are killing our people.
Well, earlier, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said the current administration supports Americans' rights to protest, adding that only a small percentage of students are causing campus disruptions. She was addressing a press conference at the White House on Wednesday, emphasizing the right to peacefully protest, but that there is need to condemn hate and anti-Semitism. Our correspondent, Maria Bird, who's in Washington, joins us now to discuss some more about this. Maria, thanks for joining us on the program. We know that you're busy chasing other stories, but this protests in the U.S. universities have been making headlines for more than a week now. What do the students want?
The students are asking for the colleges, the universities, and ultimately the government to stop investing in arms and weaponry that what they believe is creating genocide in Gaza, specifically against Palestinians. And so that is really what the issue is. It's about the financial interest that many universities have and also the U.S. government has in businesses that they believe are doing harm against the people of Palestine.
So the police is stepping into the campuses. They're trying to maintain law and order. We've seen arrests. We've seen the presence of police, at the University of Texas and in Austin. And then this morning, stories about the situation in College University in New York has been making headlines. I think the police is still there. They're trying to dismantle the encampments that have been made on the campus grounds and also taking in students. They made arrests and so on. Does it feel safer having students on campus? What are some of the opinions you sampled from these institutions?
So the students, and actually right here in Washington, and I'm in the process of getting additional information on George Washington University because that has been what many have called one of the most peaceful protests across the country with the encampments. And they even have food sections. They have a lot of various supports and supplies for those students that are protesting. And it has been stated to be very peaceful. And so as you talk about, what is really happening, how are the students on the campuses? I think that when you look at the police presence on the campuses, is it about safety or is it really about trying to ensure there's no violence that breaks out? And I think that is really supposed to be the focus here. But we know too that this has gone on for many days, and the concern also is that are there others outside of the college students that are participating in these protests and potentially prolonging some of these beyond what potentially the college students are asking for. So that's where the police presence is definitely on those campuses. But the concern is also about the use of force, how much force is being used, and is this impeding upon the students and those who are protesting their rights and their right to be able to protest in the United States.
I know the students are very concerned about their rights not being impeded on, but then you also need to consider the rights of the Jewish and Palestinian students. Some of them have been complaining about the backlash of these protests. Some have reported that they have been attacked. They're being harassed, by some of these protesters. Talk to us some more about this.
And this is what I think this has heightened and this has been brought to the attention, I think, because of these protests. But if you look back as to when the war began, and even prior to that, we have been dealing in the United States with anti-Semitic hate crimes, an increase over the past few years. So this is not something that has just all of a sudden, yes, it's taken extreme heights at this time, but this is something that has been growing and brewing in the United States even before the war started. And so those students who are dealing with potential safety challenges, as you've mentioned, I think are definitely at this time, because the protests are such at a heightened level, are potentially feeling at greater risk. The question, though, is that are the police protecting those individuals and are they being placed in situations where their safety can be secured and where they can feel like they're safe? And I don't know, the police presence is more so about the violence that potentially they are seeing that's outbreaking or what they foresee as breaking the law, more so than the protection for those students that are feeling at risk. But that is a population that I know that many colleges are speaking to local authorities about how to ensure those students feel protected.
Of course, what also happens going forward is important to students as well as parents and those concerned. Now, since the University of New York has been shut because of some of these protests, is that also happening in other schools? And what goes on from there? What's the future of academic activity on these campuses?
Yes, there's a number of schools that have shut down, but many of the schools have also moved to remote learning. One of the things that obviously happened very quickly with COVID is universities had to quickly learn how to pivot to remote education. And so some universities have already pivoted to that remote learning environment, specifically for exams, because most universities are in their exam period if those have not concluded. The real challenge is for those graduations that have been canceled, because that means that many of the students that are now heading their senior year in college and graduating were those same students that were seniors when during the COVID period. So that has brought great concern to many families whose children will not be able to actually have a formal graduation. But the online community is what many schools are pivoting to if they do close physically.
Now we've seen, pro-Palestinian protests in the United States as well as in other parts of the world. People feel very passionate about what's going on, condemning Israel, for the attacks in Gaza, and then calling attention to the humanitarian situation there, in the Gaza Strip. Is that a reflection, the students' protest, is that a reflection of how the rest of the country feels about these pro-Palestinian protests?
I think for a very large percentage of the American population, that is, I think, some of what you might hear. I mean, as we've seen, the approval rating of the current president has drastically dropped, one that I think many people were not expecting, which tells us that the average American does not necessarily agree with some of the policy that has moved forward as it relates to the war. And so the students are the ones that we're seeing speak out, but there are many that are also, is it the same proportionate number? Potentially not, but there is still a large subsection of Americans that are not 100% in agreement with the policies.
Maria, thanks again for bringing us up to speed. Now, in another development, the Israeli government has reopened the Seoul crossing on the northern edge of the Gaza Strip, allowing aid trucks to pass through the area's checkpoint following the U.S. demands to do more to address the growing humanitarian crisis. The crossing was reopened on Wednesday. It's been one of the main pleas of international aid agencies for months to alleviate hunger, which is believed to be most severe among the hundreds of thousands of civilians in the enclave's northern sector. The Israeli government opened the crossing point on the day of a visit by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and called for more humanitarian aid deliveries into the territory. The area's crossing, primarily used for foot traffic, had remained closed since it was destroyed during the Hamas attacks on October 7 that precipitated the war. Colombia's President Gustavo Petro has announced the severing of diplomatic ties with Israel over the war in Gaza. President Petro made the announcement at a rally marking International Workers' Day in Bogota on Wednesday. He told the crowd these colors could be summarized in a single word that vindicates the necessity of life, rebellion, the raised flag, and resistance. That word is called Gaza. It's called Palestine. It's called the girls, the boys, the babies who've been dismembered by bombs. Adding, here in front of you, the government of change. The President of the Republic reports that diplomatic relations with the State of Israel will be severed tomorrow. In response, Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz posted on X, that's formerly Twitter, that history will remember that Gustavo Petro decided to side with the most despicable monsters known to mankind. His words. The country has previously been a close partner of Israel. In Latin America, Bolivia has also severed relations, while Nicaragua brought a case against Germany at the World Court, accusing Berlin of facilitating genocide with arms deliveries. Israel has strongly denied claims of genocide, saying it is targeting Hamas militants and infrastructure. Israel's representative to the United Nations, Gilad Erdan, was addressing the UN General Assembly also on Wednesday in reaction to a membership bid by Palestine, which was put to the vote. The bid failed, but Mr. Erdan claimed the UN's reaction to the Gaza war made him sick. Meanwhile, Palestinian ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, criticized members' portrayal of a two-state solution while standing idly by while Israel, he says, tried to destroy the Palestinian state.
Here in New York, even with the best of intentions, will not achieve statehood for the Palestinian people. As a member of the Security Council, the United States has a special responsibility to ensure that our actions further the cause of international peace and security and are consistent with the requirements of the UN Charter. As reflected in the report of the Admission Committee, there was not unanimity among committee members as to whether the applicant met the criteria for membership as set forth in Article 4 of the UN Charter.
The admission of the State of Palestine to the United Nations is an unequivocal signal that Palestinian self-determination and statehood are not subject to the whims and will of the extremists in Israel. Our admission to the UN is long overdue, long overdue. It has been 75 years in the making.
You have done nothing for the victims, but have mobilized for the murderers. It makes me want to vomit. Yes, vomit. You know that the Palestinian Authority doesn't meet the criteria for statehood. No Palestinian leader, not a single one of them, has even condemned Hamas or their massacre. You prefer another rogue state, and to hell with the Jewish state. Soon, the world will wake up and see the disaster that the UN has become. In the future, remember my words, students will study the fall of the UN. They will learn of this organization's moral bankruptcy and blindness. They will be taught that your indifference and hypocrisy is what brought the UN crashing down. But this is also what will prompt the establishment of a new world institution, a force for good, one with a strong moral compass, democratic values, a body that will refuse to give dictators a free pass and terrorists a lifeline. Mark my words, the UN's days are numbered.
Palestinian ambassador to the UK, Hussam Zomlot, joined hundreds of pro-Palestinian demonstrators on the streets of London on Wednesday as they demanded an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Demonstrators marched with Palestinian flags and rallying outside the offices of the defense contractor Bay Systems amid a heavy police presence. They also marched to Trafalgar Square, where they listened to speeches.
Be very clear about what is happening in Gaza. It is genocide. Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. It has destroyed more than 70% of Gaza's homes, all of Gaza's universities, 70% of Gaza's schools, 2/3 of its hospitals and medical centers. This genocide would end tomorrow if Israel's allies withdraw their support, their diplomatic support, their financial support, their military support. This must end. It must change. And if change will not come from the top, change will come from you.
Well, here in Africa, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa led hundreds of ANC supporters and members on a march in solidarity with Palestine. Pro-Palestinian activists waved flags and held banners. South Africa took Israel to the International Court of Justice in January, accusing the country of genocide in Gaza, which the country strongly denies. The march was also to mark the International Workers' Day.
It was Madiba who said, our freedom will never be complete until the freedom of the Palestinians is achieved. We also want the people of Western Sahara to win their own self-determination. We want to continue supporting all those around the world